So I went to school the other day, like the actual school, like the school building. And I'll tell you what, it was like a dream. Not like a happy dream, not like one of those dreams I want to fall back asleep and get right back into kind of dreams. No, this was like a totally bizarre dream. You know what I mean? Like when you go into a place, you feel like you've been 1,000 times before, but the more you walk around, the more you look around, things just start and look totally unfamiliar, totally bizarre, totally weird. And you get this feeling like it's not the same place that you've gone before. That's what it felt like. And the more I look around, the more I would go through the hallway and get my stuff and pick up this book and deliver that and do all this stuff, the more I realized the best part was missing. The best part was missing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like when we transitioned into this remote learning and we were kind of thrown into this, your teachers did a great job of adapting, overcoming, shifting, and transitioning into these online remote classes. And you guys did fantastic. Up for the challenge, stepping in when you need to do, asking for help, doing this, doing that. I think you guys really stepped up to the challenge of getting into and onto this online format. But this is the thing. Online school is kind of like, I don't know, Lucky Charms without the marshmallows, right? You know what it is, and you eat it, and it kind of gets the job done at breakfast. But it's not the reason that you eat it. You're leaving out your favorite part. Like we like school, not because of the books and the learning. I mean, some of us maybe, but most of us like school. We like to do these things. We like to go to school because of the people that are there, the connections that we have, the community that's built over the years of that experience together. So, with these next few weeks left, right? Winding down toward the end of school, these last few weeks left, how are we going to stay connected? How are we going to build community when we seem so disconnected? How are we going to build momentum together when we're so far apart? You know, the last few weeks, during our chapel time on Wednesdays, I've been reading through and we've been walking through the Psalms of Ascent that are found at Psalms 121 or 120 through 134. We've been kind of reading those together. A few people, we've been getting together online on the chapel channel. We've been getting together and reading through some of those over and over and seeing what God is speaking to us together and praying together at those times. See, the thing is these Psalms of Ascent were psalms that Hebrew people would sing and recite on their way to Jerusalem as they were making their pilgrimage, as they were making their walk toward Jerusalem during the festival times. And they would sing these songs, they would recite these psalms together. They would do it to inspire one another, but more they would do it to build community with one another. They would sing with their family and they would build not just motivation to get to Jerusalem, but they would build momentum together as they recited and they sang these psalms together. And they would build that community together. Now there's been one of these Psalms of Ascent that's been rolling through my head over and over and over. In fact, it's been going over in my head for like the past 3 or 4 months. And this is Psalm 133. I absolutely love it, right? Toward the end of these Psalms of Ascent. And it begins like this. It says, "How good and how delightful is it when brothers dwell in unity." How good and delightful is it when brothers and sisters dwell in unity and in community. And I love those words, good and delightful. I love those words because when he talks about it being delightful, the psalmist is describing that it's beautiful, that it's attractive, it's something that we want to be a part of because of the beauty that is in it. But he also uses that word good. Now that word good that he uses is the same word that God used when he created things as they were supposed to be. When he created the earth and he created all these things, he said that it was good. And so when we dwell in unity, when we dwell in community together, it is good. It's as it is supposed to be. And then the psalmist uses a couple metaphors. Uses a couple different metaphors to describe this goodness and this delightfulness, this beauty that is when we build together, when we have this community together. The first metaphor is one of proximity. It's like, it talks about oil on Aaron's beard. Now Aaron, as the high priest, right, he's that go-between between God and his people and their God. And he's that one, right, they would anoint his head with that oil and it would drip down his beard and onto his clothes, and people and those that were around him could smell the fragrant oil, and they could take part in the beauty of that moment and that time and that connection, not just with one another, but with them and their God. And it was a beautiful thing to take part of, as they are close to one another. And that's that beauty that we see when we dwell in community. Now, the other metaphor has to do with a couple mountains. He says it's like the dew of Mount Hermon going on the mountains of Zion. I think to fully understand this one a little better, we have to know both the geography and the meteorology of the area. We have to know like where things are located, but we also have to know a little bit about the weather. See, the thing is about these mountains of Zion. The mountains of Zion, that's another phrase that's used to describe Jerusalem and the area that's around. See, Jerusalem sits on a mountain, and that word Zion referred to those mountains that Jerusalem sat on as the mountains of Zion and the area that's around. Now, the thing is, though, about these mountains and this area around Jerusalem is that it's a rather dry place, rather arid place. In fact, they would refer to some of the area around as wilderness or desert. See, it wasn't necessarily good for growing crops. You see a lot of shepherds, you see a lot of ranchers, you see a lot of people with animals around there, but it wasn't the best for growing beautiful crops all the time. Every now and then they'd get a wet season that would do it, but most of the time it wasn't good for growing these crops. Now, on the other hand, Mount Hermon is a much taller mountain. See, Mount Hermon is in fact covered with snow because of its height and because of the precipitation that comes in from the Mediterranean. And on that high peak, you'll see the dew that just covers the area around Mount Hermon. And it's lush and it's green and it's beautiful. But this is the thing, is that Mount Hermon and the mountains of Zion are about 100 miles apart. 100 miles apart. I mean, driving there today, it would still take you a couple hours. Imagine traveling by camel or walking, how long it would take, the distance that he's talking about between these two locations. But he says that living in unity is like the dew that falls on Mount Zion. And this is the thing, is that occasionally, even with this distance, the dew from Mount Zion, that precipitation, could find its way to the mountains of Zion. And in those days, they would celebrate when that precipitation would fall, because it would grow the crops more than they could ever imagine. But this is, how did it get there? We ask the question, how did it get there? See, we focus a lot on the distance and the problem between these two places, but we don't look at how the dew gets from Hermon to Mount Zion. We don't focus and we don't look at the wind. Occasionally this north wind would bring that dew and that precipitation down to the mountains of Zion so those crops could grow and those seasons would be celebrated. That's the thing, is that we only focus on the distance, but we don't see the wind. We focus on what is separating us, but we don't see what is working between us, that connection between us. We don't focus on that. And I think that is sometimes our problem. Sometimes when we are like where we are right now, in this time right now, we focus on what is keeping us apart. We focus on the distance. We focus on staying in our houses or staying here or staying a certain distance apart or wearing our mask or whatever it is. We are so focused on keeping that distance that we don't have our eyes on what is connecting us together. And what connects us together is that wind. It is that Spirit. It's the Spirit of God that keeps us connected together. It is us as a school that connects us together. It's us as a body of believers that keeps us connected together. It is us as a family, brothers and sisters. And how beautiful it is when we dwell in unity, no matter the distance. See, The thing is about these Psalms of Ascent is that they, as I said, they sing these as they are on their way to Jerusalem. They are on their way somewhere, and sometimes they're traveling hundreds of miles, and they get worn out, and they would get tired, and they'd feel like that finish line, that Jerusalem, just keeps getting farther and farther away. In fact, the more that they walk, and they aren't even sure sometimes that it's going to be worth it when they get there. But this is what they have: is they have one another as they push each other along, as they push each other toward that goal. Now, at the end of school coming, some of us are really excited just to get it over with. Some of us want a celebration. Some of us don't know what's going to be on the other end of whatever's going on. But what we do know is that instead of focusing on the distance between us, what we can do and what we should do is focus on that which brings us together. And is when we come together, whether it's a connection by phone or by Teams, yes, by Teams, or by FaceTime, or whatever it is that keeps you connected to one another. See, sometimes some of you feel like you're on Mount Zion's, right? You feel like you're in the mountains of Zion. You feel like you're in the wilderness. You feel like you are somewhere where it is too arid to grow anything. You feel like you are not growing in any way during this time. Some of you, though, you're thriving. You're like that Mount Hermon. You're like, you even for some reason love this circumstance. We need to work together because some of us need the help. We need the unity to help us build that momentum to finish strong. And some of us can reach out to one another. We can reach out to those that may be struggling, may be hurting, may just need a connection of some kind to bring us and give us that momentum to finish strong. May we not focus on the distance, but may we focus on what brings us together and how good and beautiful that is.